Hi everyone, welcome to my studio. It's Thursday night. Let's learn something. Let's learn something different, okay? So what are we going to do tonight? Tonight we're going to talk about sewing knits on a regular sewing machine. You do not have to have a serger in order to sew knits. We sewed with knits years and years ago. Back in the 60s, there was something called stretch and sew that a lot of ladies took those classes. We didn't have sergers in the 60s, not at the home market. They started coming out in the 1970s, late 1960s, early 1970s. They started making sergers for the home market. And they were rather crude and hard to thread and hard to keep threaded. So we learned to sew with our sewing machine, and you can still do it. In fact, you could even still do it with a straight stitching sewing machine. Yes, it's nice to have the new electronic ones, which have built-in stitches for you. A lot of people are intimidated by knits. Knits are actually very easy to sew, and they're even easier to fit the body. The hardest thing about sewing garments is a fit. We're not good at fitting ourselves. So using a knit can actually help a lot of those problems because the fit doesn't have to be so perfect. First of all is look at your pattern. Your pattern is going to tell you what type of knit to use. There are all different types of knits out there on the market. There's single knit, double knit, ITY, sweater knits. You name it, there's all different kinds of knits. Usually a pattern will not only tell you how much fabric to buy, but it'll tell you how much stretch a fabric has to have for that pattern to work with it. So, and it'll usually tell you that it's a single knit or a double knit, or let's talk about and the four-way stretch. Those are basically the biggest kinds there are. Okay, there is a single knit is in essence a t-shirt. A single knit fabric. I don't know if you'll catch it on screen. But what it is that you'll see, if you've ever knitted before, one side will have vertical lines. That's what we call the knit side. The knit side will be the vertical lines, and that's usually your right side of your fabric. And on the back is going to be little horizontal lines. They call it purl because they look like little bumps. I don't know if you can see. These are the little bumps. This would be the wrong side. Although right and wrong side is subjective. If you want this on the front, fine. No one's going to, you just have to be consistent. Don't do the right half and on the right side and the left side on the wrong side. You'll see it then. When you have a single knit, if you pull it, like if the selvages are from here to here, if you pull this way from selvage to selvage like this, it should curl towards the right side. That's true for most knits, not all. A fleece is usually knitted. A fleece will curl towards the wrong side most of the time. Before you cut your fabric, you want to stretch it. Decide which one is the right side, and it could be clearly subjective. It's what side you like is the right side. Just don't mix them up. Some single knits are better than other single knits. If you curl this, okay, when you're looking for a knit, if you curl the knit and you let it go and it still stays really curled up, leave that fabric alone. Don't buy it. You're gonna have grief, and that can be for all types of knits. I've had a lot of knits where you stretch it and it starts to run. So try stretching it from both sides. If it starts to run down, again, leave that piece of fabric alone. Don't buy it. A double knit is usually a thicker knit, and it's usually made for slacks and skirts and things like that. And so here's a good example of, it's hard to see it, but this is a double knit, and it looks the same from both sides. And usually a double knit as well as a single knit will have more stretch in one direction than the other. So see this one on the grain, I call it going with the grain. It virtually has no stretch at all, and that's usually true of a double knit. And then when you stretch it side to side, you have more stretch, and you want to measure it. So a lot of times you'll take a ruler and take, say, 3 or 4 inches, relaxed, open it up, see how big it stretches out to, because that's what your pattern's going to tell you. It says it must stretch 2 inches or 1 inch or whatever. Here's a t-shirt knit. So it has more stretch in one direction. It does stretch, but not a lot. And it has a lot more stretch in the other direction. Again, read your pattern. Then you have a lycra, or a 4-way stretch. A lot of the ITY fabrics, as well as a swimsuit fabric, is going to be a 4-way stretch. T-shirt knits, single knits, double knits are usually 2-way stretches, which means it stretches mostly in one direction, the other one's kind of firm. A 4-way stretch is pretty much going to have equal stretch in both directions. And sometimes they'll say, like especially for swimsuits, must stretch 2 to 4 inches, per foot or whatever. It has to stretch a certain amount or that pattern's not going to fit you right. So that's the basics. Then you also have a sweater knit, which is obviously really stretchy in like all directions, but you'll have special patterns for that. Then there's jersey knits. Jersey knits are the ones that I have problems with them running sometimes, so be careful. They're kind of flimsy a lot of times. ITY fabric can be kind of flimsy also. If you're just beginning, start with a t-shirt knit or a double knit. One that's a heavier weight so that it's easier to handle until you get used to handling a knit. Because what makes sewing knits easy is just learning to handle the fabric in your hands. It's different where a cotton fabric, you just sort of let the feed dogs take it as it wants to go. Well, you let a knit do that and it's going to not want to go straight. It's going to want to stretch. It's going to want to pucker. So you want to get a little bit of experience before you take on some of these flimsy knits. Thread. You want to pick a good quality thread. You don't have to have special thread for a knit. You don't have to use serger thread for a knit as well. Just having a good general purpose, strong polyester is fine to use. In fact, most knit has either nylon or polyester in it as well as cotton. It's rare to find a pure cotton knit. Very hard to find. Most of them are going to be a blend. You can use any thread. As far as needles go, a lot of times you can use a universal needle. A universal needle is a slight ballpoint tip, and it has a normal size scarf, and you can see it in this picture. And then the eye of the needle is relatively small, but it's the standard size. Universal is the cheapest needle to buy. They're the cheapest to use. They are what we call a jack of all trades and a master of none. It's designed to sew on both knits as well as wovens. Try it. Some knits don't like it. You start getting skip stitches, you're going to need to switch to something else. Then you have a ball-pointed needle. A ball-point needle is the same thing as a jersey needle. You'll see both of those on the package. Then you have what's called a stretch needle. That's a little different. A ballpoint needle actually has a standard eye and a standard scarf. So those will be the same as a universal needle. The difference between a jersey / ballpoint needle is that it is a fully rounded tip. And by a rounded tip, what I mean is instead of piercing through the fabric, it's going to push it aside and it's going to stitch between the yarns of a knit. Therefore, it won't break the knit. Then there is what's called a stretch needle. A stretch needle is designed for a 4-way knit or a lycra. It is a full ball-pointed needle. A stretch needle has the same tip as a ballpoint jersey needle. The difference is that the eye is a little bit smaller, and the scarf, which is that indent on the back, is a little bit bigger. Why? It's because Lycra tends to grab a hold of the threads as they're going as the needle is going through the fabric, and it tends to grab those threads, and that's why you get skip stitches. So therefore, when you're using a stretch needle, the scarf is bigger to accommodate that stretching that can happen and that pulling that can happen on the threads. So what I usually do is I will start with a universal needle. If it works fine, hey, we're good. Okay, then you've also got size to consider. Jersey needles or ballpoint needles usually come in even sizes. In other words, there'll be 12 or 14. Where a stretch needle is usually going to be an odd number. So they're usually going to be size 11 or 13 or 15 at the most. Like even with sergers, especially the 8-thread machines, we'll take what's called an EL705 needle, which is specific to that. It is designed for that machine, and those only come in a universal point. They do not come in full ballpoint, and they do not come in full stretch needle. If you need to use a stretch ballpoint or a jersey needle on that machine, you can do it, but watch the video that I have, and I'll put it in the description below, that talks about the 8-thread machines and what you need to do and what you need to watch for when you use these needles on that machine. Okay, let's talk about the stitches that we use. So, okay, here's our screen. We've got lots of stitches to choose from. Let's go with the straight stitch first and why it doesn't work like it does with woven. So here's the regular stitch. I'm just going to take the default of a center stitch with a stitch length of 2.5, and I'm going to go ahead and stitch it. So I'm just going to stitch just a regular seam, regular length. Okay, let's take a look at this. Okay, it's well, it's a little bit wavy, but you know, that's livable, and that would press right back into shape. Let's see, does it give us a decent, it gives you a decent seam? Here's what it doesn't give you. There you go, you just popped it out. So in the old stretch and sew days, we would handle a seam like this. You would put it right sides together, which is what I've got. Okay, and then I would sew my seam, but I would start to stitch, and then you would stretch it as you were going. Sometimes you'd have to stretch from both sides, and that's how we did it with. That's how you have to do it with. You have nothing but a straight stitcher. Okay, and now you got a lot of rippling. That usually will press back into shape. So as I press it with steam, let's see what happens. It does go back. See, it does go back into shape. So the old stretch and sew does work, and it's the only thing, it is difficult to get a straight seam. A little harder because when you're pulling, it's going to distort. Because when you're pulling a knit, as you pull the knit, it retracts towards, you know, it stretches out. So you think you're here. See, if I pull that, it looks straight. But here I pulled more, so therefore it was thinner, and I just made it. So it's a little harder to get an accurate seam. Now a triple seam is easy to do because it goes two stitches forward and 1 stitch back. Modern machines, you have what we call a stretch stitch, okay, which is on these machines, stretch stitch, triple stitch, has different names. So here's how this goes. Okay. So here's the triple stitch there, and you can see it. This is normal stitch length, and it has give. It does pucker a little bit, but it also presses back into shape. The problem with this stitch, it's near to impossible to unsew. You're going to want this stretch stitch in any of the parts of the garment that are going to be subject to stress, such as sleeves, necklines, shoulders, waistlines, crotch seams, all of that, because those are the seams that are more likely to pop. On a side seam, you could get away with a straight stitch. What I really like about the stretch stitch is the fact that on a woven, it makes a really, really nice top stitch without having to use top stitch thread, which is thicker, which means you need a bigger needle, and without having to have a special needle, a top stitch needle. You can use a regular needle, regular thread, because top stitch thread comes in limited colors. And look at this on a woven. That is really pretty and makes a really, this is wonderful for handbags. This is never going to come out. So if you're stitching pockets and whatever for handbags, this is an excellent stitch. Again, be real sure of your seams, because it's harder to pick out. Takes a lot longer. Now on a regular sewing machine, not an electronic one, but on a manual sewing machine, and if you look at the picture, here's picture one. If you take a look at this picture, you will see a stitch length. And you'll see the stitch length right here. You usually have stitch length 1 to 4. And then if you take it past 0 and go to SS, that's stretch stitch. And if you look at the just below, you'll see a straight stitch and you see a triple stitch below it. That means the top row of those will do a regular stitch, and when you put it on SS, it's going to do those stretch stitches. So that's why a lot of these mechanical machines can do over edging and a lot of other things. Okay, this next stitch is called I call it the lightning stitch, which is 106 on this machine, and this is usually going to be on a machine that is electronically driven. It does a slight angled zigzag. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. And you can change, on this machine, you can change the width of it and change the length of it. So now this is the lightning stitch. And you can make it longer. Again, this is another stitch that is hard to pick out. And because it's back and forth, it has built-in stretch. The only thing is it gives you a slightly thicker seam. So this gives you a nice flat seam, so it's pretty good. I like this one better than the triple stitch, to be honest with you, especially for sleeves. Notice I got little to no puckering at all. Okay, another stitch you can use is just a standard zigzag, and all machines have that. If you want to make your stitch length smaller, or your normal it says 1.4, I'm probably going to put that down to 1.0, and I might want my stitch width at 1 or 1.5 millimeters wide. It's not quite as elastic as the lightning stitch, but it will work at a 1. Now I'm sewing on a piece of Sophia, and I'm using a universal needle without having any problems. Again, I'm getting a little bit of waving, not a whole lot, but again, that can press in. It too is a small stitch length. Let's take a look and see how it opens. So it's a small stitch length, so be, again, sure of your fit. And let's see, does it give me a nice flat seam? Yeah, it's pretty good. It does show a little more. However, it shows about the same as a serger, because a serger is you're going to see a little bit of thread. So if you have thread that matches your fabric, that's not an issue. And actually that works really well, and it has got a good amount of stretch to it. So a zigzag works. So you don't have to have these. That's available on almost every machine except for one that only does a straight stitch. If you get a lot of this stretching, then you can do things like reduce the pressure on that's exerted by the foot. And to change that, sometimes it's a dial up here, sometimes there's a dial on the side. On mechanical machines, on a serger, it's usually on the top and on the side on some models. And then on this machine, it's all done electronically. So you would consult your manual to see how you reduce the pressure. Now, why you would need to reduce the pressure? Now, this is exaggerated, but if you start sewing that both of your seams are together in one spot, and when you're done, the one on the top overlaps, this is exaggerated by a lot, that means you've got too much pressure. Also, reducing the pressure helps reduce some of that puckering. If you end up with it not wanting to pull the fabric at all through the feed dogs, then that means you don't have enough pressure. I rarely ever have to mess with that. But if you're still having trouble with puckering and stretching or that kind of thing, try using a roller foot. And that's a regular foot with wheels underneath that helps to pull that fabric underneath a little easier. And some people swear by using a Teflon foot. And even a walking foot. You could use a walking foot as well. So how is this different than using the chain stitch on your cover stitch or 8-thread machines? This is what it looks like on the front, on one side of a chain stitch. Okay. When it opens up just as flat as when we did it with a sewing machine. But the difference is on the wrong side, on the underside of the chain stitch, then it's thicker. The other thing too is that this will pick out, you could actually pick out the threads, pull out the thread just like a potato bag and remove the stitches, which is why a chain stitch is good for. If you're not sure of your fit and you just want to baste it, you can take a long chain stitch and then just pull the thread, and then your seam is unsewn. It's easy to take apart. Okay, let's talk about finishing seams with your sewing machine. I know most of the people who have sergers claim that all they ever do with it is finishing seams, which is what they're usually doing is this 3-thread narrow overlock. It looks like that on the front and it looks like that on the back. Okay, well, we have a choice of zigzagging. So we'll just use the same zigzag we had before. Okay, I'm just going to leave the default. Okay. All right, it finished the edges okay. Ripply, and tends to be a little tunneled. Will it press out? Let's see. Yes, it did. It pressed out fairly decently. It's okay. Okay, but say we want something a little more professional looking. And this stitch isn't going to work well at all on a real thin knit. This is a real thin one. And so when I try and stitch over that, it's probably going to tunnel a lot. Yeah, in fact, it almost rolls the seam. Yeah, it's almost rolled. It's very thin. I mean, and also it doesn't have, I can feel it doesn't have the stretch. And probably, yeah, I'm hearing popping. Do you hear that popping? So yes, it can pop. So, but you know, most machines will have an overcast looking stitch, and like, I'm not going to remember what that is. Okay, so let's talk about the Stitch Advisor that's available on Baby Locks and Brothers and a lot of other machines. This thing that looks like a question mark. I want a sewing guide because I don't know how to do overcasting. Don't remember, and look, it's telling me what you can use and what it's used for. So we have these stitches, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. And it's telling you what kind of fabric that you would use with that particular stitch. So let's stitch a couple of these. Let's look at the ones that say that are good for knits, because there's no sense overcasting something that you don't need. That's on a woven. Okay, thin and medium fabric is 16. Okay, 17 is for thick fabric. So those are talking about using woven fabrics. So we have 18, 19, 20, and 21, which are good stitches to use for stretches. So let's use one. Let's use, say, we'll start with 18. 18, return. Okay, and it's already set up with 18. We want to use the G foot, which is the overcasting foot. So what the G foot is, the G foot is sort of like a standard foot. It's got a couple of little things. It has a bar in here. Remember I said that we saw it kind of tunnel in? Because when it does a zigzag, it draws the fabric in. This bar keeps it from tunneling. And then it's got a guide right here that sort of dropped down a little bit lower to help guide the edge of the fabric. So let's go ahead and put this on the machine. Okay. And we're just going to do the default stitch. So let's go nice and close so you can see what's going on. And knits do like to start in and out, start and stop in fabric. Okay. So I'm just pushing the edge of the fabric against that guide. I'll just do half of it. Looks a lot more like what the serger does. Okay, it's a little on the thick side. This would be a good one because you could also use this to seam. You could. Now the big advantage to a serger as versus the sewing machine is this serger is a lot faster. For one thing, a serger stitches at 1,200 stitches per minute, and this is nowhere near that. And see, this did a very nice seam, and it's going to seam it as well as overcast it in one operation. And it didn't pucker. It did a very nice job. It still has stretch, has a good amount of stretch, and it makes a very secure seam. So that actually does a very good job. Okay, let's check out next one, which is 119. And that one looks like that. Okay, let's go back to stitching, and I will stitch the other half of this with that. And again, I'm using a double layer as if I was putting a seam together. Okay, that did a very nice job. In fact, that has more stretch than this. Okay, see how much I can stretch this one as versus this one. So this is tighter. Okay, it does look an awful lot like it was done on a serger. This one is 20, says to be done with the J foot, but I'm going to use this G foot anyway. This one looks like the wide. This one's just a little narrower. Otherwise, they look the same. See, here's the narrower one. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same. Does a really nice job. Doesn't have that as much scalloping as the other one. Then we have number 121. This machine has got more overcasting stitches than it says on the advisory. Now, sometimes the mechanical machines will also have these stitches on there. And here's the one that this machine has. That some of these stitches are there, but they're on the SS setting. All of these are saying use the J foot. So I'm going to go back to the J foot and see what it does. The risk in using the J foot in a hurry is that little bar. I'm not sure if that is going to hit the little bar. So this one is using, says overcasting stitch, and that's what it looks like. And let's go back and see what that looks like on the machine. Okay, don't start that one at the end. This one's hard to control, to be honest with you. It's probably not one I will use. That was hard to control. It's doubled. It's okay. It's got a lot of stretch to it. Feels kind of thick. Not my number 122. Looks like a super wide one. And that one is going to be with the J foot again. Okay, so let's switch to this side. And with the J foot, let's see what it does. It's just an extra wide version of the other one. Okay. Yeah, that's more scallopy looking. Then we have this one, which is called a single diamond overcast. I've not heard of this before. And looks like this. Okay. See what that does. Again, asks for the J foot. Oh, that really scalloped a lot. This is not one I would probably use. And it's got moderate amount of stretch to it. Like I said, you've got a lot of choices with these machines these days. This one I'm using is called another single diamond overcast, just a different version of it. And let's see what that looks like. Nah, I'm not likely to use this one either. And that's what that looks like. Again, they all work, without a doubt. Now you have a few of these other stitches here. Right here, this one. It is, here we go. This is the same as this stitch, only it has a side cutter. And a side cutter is a foot that I don't have. It came out with the Alissimo, and it's been around for years, and it's essentially just has a side cutter on it. The part of it attaches to the needle bar, or it goes above the needle bar, and it goes up, makes the blade go up and down and cuts as well as sews. This one is the number 28. It's the same as that stitch, but with a side cutter, so it's got the S. And this one's got the same as that one with a side cutter. And we had them. They were actually a few models that actually delivered with that foot, but that blade goes dull very quickly. The other thing too is that it is very slow. So if you're wanting to cut, get a serger. It's a lot faster. Now we're going to talk about blind hemming. And blind hemming is not something I like to do on a serger at all. This is best on a sewing machine. This is a 2-thread flat lock as it looks as it comes off the machine. Here's why I don't like it. Because it is a flat lock. It opens up, and guess what? You see this on the front. I don't like that. Now if I were doing sportswear and I was going to weave in some ribbon, it's got a lot of stretch to it, I'll give you that, but if I were going to weave in some ribbon, that would be okay. Does have a lot of stretch. And it looks nice from the back. nice and secure so heels won't poke out the hem. But this is I don't like that at all. I prefer all my blind hemming to be done on the sewing machine. And it's going to use a special foot. And you can watch my video about how to do a blind hem. I've got it on the site, and I'll put the link in the description below, as well as how to using the overcast feet. I'll put all of these links into the description below on the YouTube channel. But normally it'll use this R foot, and it has this blade down the middle that is a guide. So I'm going to switch, put this foot on the machine. Now, again, I'm going to use the stitch advisory on the sewing machine. Go to sewing guide. I want is blind hem stitch. And there's really only one. 2-02 is for stretch stitch. It will tell you here how to set it up for a blind hem. So I'm going to hit return, return, and return. And okay. You will have a stretch blind stitch on a mechanical machine as well. In some models it'll be under stretch stitch, and some models it'll be on just the regular stitch length. I'm just going to take the default. And it had directions in there on how to do this, but you know, I don't follow their directions. So I'm going to show you how I do a blind hem stitch. Again, the video on the YouTube about doing blind hemming is going to be a lot more detailed than what I'm going to show you. Okay, this would be the right side of my garment underneath. And say I've pressed my hem in. What I do is I set my pins up so that they are about 1/2 inch away from the end, and just pierce them in. I'm going to put 3 pins in. 1/2 inch away. Go. 1/2 inch away. Okay, so I put the garment with the right sides facing the bed of the machine. Then I'm going to raise the presser foot. I'm going to turn this under and flip these so that the pins, the head of the pins, is on the outside. And you don't have to press this. So you're going to put that fold right up there along the blade. Remove the pin. Okay? And I'm using this this stitch right here. Okay? And I'm just going to sew. I'm just going to sew halfway down. We'll take a look at it. Okay, that's as far as I want to go. Okay, here's the question. Did it catch it or did it not catch it? We won't know. Actually, it caught it very well. Okay. And then what I would see how that caught that. In fact, I'm using white thread and you can't see it, which is why it's so much better on a sewing machine than it is on a serger. And this seam has got, or this hem has got stretch to it. Okay, now I'm going to continue on. Put this back. Now let's talk about if it didn't catch. What this is supposed to do is do, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches forward, zigzagging along the way, and 1 wider zigzag just catching the edge of the fabric. Say it doesn't catch the edge of the fabric. I'll go back to my screen. This is normally your stitch width, and normally it see how it says 0, 0? I want this zigzag bigger. So if I take the width, okay, and I hit the plus, well, it's showing an arrow going this way, which means it takes the zigzag shallower. So I want to go this way. I'm going to exaggerate it because I'm going to show you what it does compared, okay? Okay, same thing. I'm going to put that fold up right there. Okay. See, now it's caught too much. Okay? That caught too much. Say I'm going back to 0, just so the default, which I did here, and it was perfect there. But say when I did this, I ended up getting something that looked like this, which meant it was taking too big of a bite. So there I would go back to the machine, take it from 0, hit the plus, and notice the arrows going that way. I need to make it smaller. And watch, now when I stitch this, it won't catch at all, because we know that. We know it won't catch. Oh, here we go. It's not catching at all. I'm using the same reference point. It didn't catch. Okay, where these caught too much, this was just right. You don't need to finish a knit, so you just simply cut it. Well, not there. That didn't catch, but see, now that gives you a finished edge, and heels cannot get caught in here to bust out the seam, especially high heels. See, that did a wonderful job. Another way to do a hem is to do a cover stitch. This is actually why a lot of people buy cover stitch machines or the 8-thread machine, so they can do this stitch. And this is what a cover stitch does. It's 2 rows of stitching on the front, and it does an over, just a little decorative, not decorative, it's just a little thicker on the back. It has a lot of elasticity, works really well. This one is the narrow cover stitch, and this is the wider cover stitch, and it's the same thing, only it is wider. You are restricted to these 2 sizes. That's it, okay? Can you do this with a sewing machine? Yes and no. It's going to be different. For one thing, it's not going to have as much elasticity, but it will work fine. I mean, it will work. And a lot of people, I used it for years because I didn't have a serger. Okay, one thing you can do to simulate a cover stitch is to use a twin needle. These needles, usually you got one with your machine, and what you got with your machine is a 2 millimeter wide, and I'll show you what the differences are. They come in different widths. This is the 2 millimeter, the 4 millimeter, and the 6 millimeter. Well, you can get it 3 millimeter, which is what I believe a narrow cover stitch is a 3 millimeter. I don't have a 3 millimeter, I have a 4. And then you have a 6 millimeter, which is the equivalent to the wide. Let's go ahead and use this 4 for now. So with these, you're going to need 2 spools of thread and 1 bobbin. You cannot use your automatic needle threader. If you have a fully automatic threader, like in the Elegante, what you do is you leave in the regular needle, put 2 spools of thread up here, which is what I'm going to do. There's 2. The 2 top needle threads thread through the tensioning mechanism the same as it always would. And as long as you only have 1 needle in there, you can use the needle threader. But if you already, and then what you do is you take out this needle, I'm going to put in the 4 for now. Threads are in the way. There. It goes in with 1 shaft. The only thing is now you have to thread these needles on your own. I have a needle threader because I cannot do that. I can't see it. So I'm just going to thread them using the needle threader. Through. And then I do this one. Do one then the other. Okay. And I'm going to put these under the foot. 1 bobbin thread. Okay. Now I'm just going to go to a regular straight stitch. Okay, center needle straight stitch, which for me is number 3. It is a center needle. I'm going to use a 2.5 inch stitch length. That's fine. I might make it bigger. Okay, now we have controls on these electronic machines right here. This is we are telling it we are using a twin needle. What that does is it limits the swing of your zigzag, because you can use these needles decoratively using 2 threads and get a different effect. But if you are using this icon here, it is assuming you are using no bigger than a 2 millimeter wide stitch. It limited it. It's going in. It's not going to let it go any wider, which is likely I'm going to mess up this. There I'm hitting metal, so you don't stitch that. I'm going to go back to a straight stitch, okay? And I want it in the center, so yes, it's in the center. Whether you've told it you're using a twin needle or not, anytime you use a twin needle, be sure you hand walk the stitch through the entire cycle of the stitch. So if it's a decorative stitch, hand walk it all the way through, because what you don't want to happen is you do not want to have the needle strike the plate. These needles are expensive. They're about $5 each. You don't want to be breaking them. And then here it is. It's a universal point. And I'm using, oh, it's working. They do make twin ballpoint needles. I don't have them. This one's a universal point. See? And it skipped stitches. Not good. Not happy with that. It does have a little bit of stretch to it. No, I'm not liking that at all. Why are we getting a bad stitch? Let me see if I have a ballpoint one. My machine is not liking that. I got skip stitches on one of the needles. If I had used this before and it hit the metal, because see, your space here is only very small. It's only 7 millimeters wide. And if you're taking this needle and it's hitting one side or the other, you're ruining this needle. This needle is probably no good anymore. I put the 2 millimeter needle in the machine, and I'm going to fold this under. I am just going to simply use the J-foot and stitch. And this is a universal point. They do make stretch needles, but I don't have any on hand. Now, this is the one that comes with the machine and is a 2 millimeter needle, and actually does a very nice job. Now here's what it looks like on the back. It looks like a slight zigzag, and it has a nominal amount of stretch. Not a whole lot. To make this look neat, then you would take your scissor and just simply trim it, just like you would as if it came off of a serger. Okay, and there you got. And then once you press it, it looks really nice. Now let's switch to the 4 millimeter. And push it all the way to the top. Put it in there nice and tight. Then you have to thread your needles on your own. Okay, now I've changed to the 4 millimeter wide. Let's see what that looks like. And I can use this scissor. Okay, and that actually did a very nice job. And here's what it looks like on the back. It has a good amount of stretch to it. Okay, and now I've switched to the 6 millimeter wide, which is as wide as it can go. Okay, and here we go. Okay, and I got some skip stitches. Okay, that could be a couple of things. it is most likely the needle. The reason is because I had a needle strike with it and it hit the foot, and I don't have another 6mm in order to show you what it would look like. Okay, and to compare the 3 widths, this is what they look like. This is the 2, the 4, and the 6. However, I have a bad needle, and I know I do. Okay, usually near the back of your book, or at least on the Baby Lock books, they have a stitch setting chart. And it's going to go through all of your basic utility stitches, and it will actually tell you which ones are good or specifically designed for knits. Such as right here, this one starting with number 19, it says reinforced seaming of stretch fabric. Over here it's talking about more decorative stretch fabric, stitch fabric. There's lots of different ones that says it's good for stretch fabric. And it's giving you what foot to use, why you'd want to be. Here it's telling you can use the free motion foot. I don't know why you would ever want to do that, and what the ideal settings are. So it's going to tell you what stitches you can and can't use. Although usually I don't bother with this. I just let the machine tell me. But if you have got a more, simpler machine, then your book is going to tell you. So it can be a friend in helping you get the correct stitch, the correct needle for the correct fabric, and what you want to do. So you see how easy it is to use your sewing machine to sew knits. You don't have to have a serger. It just makes it faster, although I would never give mine up. But if it's in the shop, it's not the end of the world. I can still make do with my sewing machine to get done what I need to do. So that's all I have for you tonight. If you have any questions, then send me an email at waltzquilt@yahoo.com, and I'll be happy to answer them as best I can. And so thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment. Until next time, I'll see you later. Bye.